It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's our episode on the eve of Christmas. Joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack. G'day, mate. How are you? Close to Christmas, but of course Hanukkah is fresh in our minds. First day of Hanukkah on Sunday led to an awful terrorist outrage in one of the iconic places of Australia, Bondi Beach. Group of Jewish Australians from the local community celebrating the first day of Hanukkah, and what was very clearly and obviously a planned attack. A father and son let rip with rifles and shotguns at this group. There is some evidence that they were shooing other people out of the way. So I merely mention this is because they would appear to be a very, very targeted attack. Very sad news, Jack. But before we go into some analysis of where we got to lead to this awful situation, I'll just give our listeners a bit of an update. There are, of course, 16 dead, 15 victims. One of the perpetrators, Sajid Akram, is dead. His son, Naveed Akram, has been charged with 59 offences, including 15 murders and committing an act of terrorism. He has declined to be interviewed. Funerals are ongoing today. I think 10-year-old Matilda, who has been brought to our attention, she is being buried today. Holocaust survivor Alex Kleitman, who was 7 when he left the clutches of Nazi Germany, and only to be struck down by a terrorist bullet here. And there's Tibor Weitzen is also being buried today. ASIO advised New South Wales Police that Naveed Akram had been associating with Islamic extremists well before police granted a licence. It turns out 2 years before Sajid Akram applied for a gun licence, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And also New South Wales Premier Chris Minns has indicated he will recall Parliament on the eve of Christmas to consider tougher gun laws. And perhaps more disturbingly, Jack, a man has been charged over an anti-Semitic threat on an airline, a Virgin Australia flight from Denpasar to Sydney. A 19-year-old fellow was arrested by AFP officers. He hails from Condell Park. Police will allege, according to the AFP statement, police will allege the man made anti-Semitic threats and hand gestures indicating violence towards the alleged victim, who the man knew to be affiliated with the Jewish community. The arrested man was charged and bail denied. We've been charged with threatening force or violence and refused bail. Will face a New South Wales local court today. Police said there was no threat to the community. So all this sort of anti-Semitism seems to roll on, Jack.
It does.
And it would be a lovely idea to say that we can expunge it from our society, but how practical is that?
I'm trying to think of a society where that's been successful.
I don't think there is, Jack. Australia Day, I know this for a fact. Nazis will gather. They've planned something big for Australia Day. And we have at least an implicit right to political communication in this country. It often sees very disturbing scenes, chants and what have you, banners made that are grossly anti-Semitic and offensive, chants made by protest groups as well. How do we fix that? I noticed you made a little comment there about freedom of speech and how it's very difficult to legislate these things.
There is a difference over the last 10, 15 years, I would say, with anti-Semitism in not just in Australia but in the West generally, that it's broader and deeper than it used to be. I would say we didn't used to have this sort of anti-Semitism on the left or progressive side of societies very much at all, but sadly we do now.
I think we've always had it at the extremes on the left. I mean, I think that's not controversial. The Soviet regime persecuted Jews. It's not uncommon for this to occur in left-wing totalitarian governments. But I think what you're saying is that it's entered into the mainstream of left-wing thought. Let me just quote from you, or quote to you. These words were uttered by New South Wales Greens MLC Jenny Leong in December 2023 at a Palestine Justice Movement forum, so within a couple of months of the October 7 attack. She said, "The Jewish lobby and the Zionist lobby are infiltrating into every single aspect of what is ethnic community groups. Their tentacles reach into the areas that try and influence power, and I think we need to call that out and expose it." Is that the sort of rhetoric you're talking about, Jack?
Yeah, and aren't they such unoriginal thinkers? They've got to go back to the old tropes, the octopus trope or the
tentacles. It's especially foul. It's the sort of stuff that you would expect to see on the pages of Der Stürmer.
Yes.
You know, Julius Streicher's publication made available to all SS soldiers during Hitler's period in power.
But that is the sort of thing I'm talking about, and but it's crept. You know, Jenny Leong, to be fair, is sort of not an extremist on the left, but she's a fair way to the left, right? She's part of the Watermelon Greens in New South Wales. Who are largely old comps, right, that were at the head of the party. But it's come much more into the mainstream of progressive thought than that. And not just in Australia. This has happened in the UK and it's happened in the United States.
I think it's a sort of global phenomenon. I just want to, while we stick with Jenny Leong, she did apologise for those remarks that I just quoted. She did, however, apologise for them in February. So she uttered them in December. Clearly, there was a bit of a furor, and she apologised for a poor choice of words, which she admitted had anti-Semitic implications.
Can I suggest perhaps the Stalinists in the New South Wales Greens did what they normally do: is take someone in the back room and re-educate them until they offer an apology.
Yeah, maybe so. She did actually, and it's just not part of the article. I did choose that remark for a column that I wrote yesterday, but I didn't include, and space just did not permit, that she actually offered her condolences in the wake of the Bondi attack, and it just seems terribly hollow. Further on, Jack, if we want to look at the blame, so that remark, the tentacles reach into the areas to try and influence power, that remark, Jack, that hung like a bad smell for 2 months. That's what I'm saying. This kind of the Jewish tentacles spreading out into our communities, influencing people, you know, all this sort of stuff. That hung like a bad smell until she did correct it. And as I say, this sort of speech is becoming more and more normalised. There is a bit of a trick to all of this. Of course, people will often say, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist, I'm anti-Bibi Netanyahu, and they would share those views with many Jewish Australians, certainly about Netanyahu. But there is, when we start talking about Israeli Zionism, there is, I think, a very quick step towards making anti-Semitic remarks.
Yes, I get a bit irritated with all the discussions about anti-Semitism and arguments about the definition, etc. I think this is a kind of a dead end for everybody. It doesn't lead us anywhere good. It irritates me a great deal. All the arguments about whether something's anti-Zionism or anti-Semitic. What I think we've got to call out is, use the old-fashioned term. It's just plain Jew hatred that we're talking about.
It does need definitions, Jack. There are definitions, accepted definitions for anti-Semitism.
About 4 of them the last time I checked, and they're all different.
It's never easy. It's like definitions of terrorism, for example. There are a multitude of those that are out there as well. Certainly, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, seems to be copping a lot of flack over this. Josh Frydenberg described that that is, the Prime Minister was responsible for the deaths of 15 people. Is this rhetoric helpful, Jack?
Well, I don't think a sensible analysis would say that the government or the Prime Minister or the State Premier in New South Wales are responsible for this at all. I just don't think you can make that connection. What I think you can say is that they have failed. They have failed in response. They failed from October 8th on. And it's an abject failure to respond.
Where are the failures? Where are the failures? Point them out
I think they should have done something on October 8, or was it October 9, when there were mobs at the Opera House, chanting statements that are an incitement to kill.
What should have been done? What should have been done at that time?
They didn't even come out and say this is not acceptable. Really, it needed a strong government presence.
I think you're wrong about that, Jack.
Oh, I don't think I am.
I think you're actually wrong. And if you do a Google
Chris
search,
Mears was good. That the government,
and you do an advanced search, you'll find that those words were repudiated. The other thing that's come up is that by the Prime Minister. The other thing that's come up is that somehow Australia's recognition of the Palestinian state, as symbolic as that is another cause for this. But we are one of, I think, 185 nations who do.
No, I don't think it's anything to do with the recognition of the Palestinian state.
Right. So that's put to one side.
But I do think the government, the federal government in particular, was way too clever in the way they dealt with this. I think Paul Kelly's right. I think Phil Curry's right. They've all made this point that the government was trying to provide some support to the Jewish community without upsetting their Muslim voters in Western Sydney. And I think that was weak, and I think they'll pay a price for it.
What would be the price, Jack?
This is going to hurt the Labor government. It's going to hurt Anthony Albanese.
In a long-term sense, you think that will cause him, problems with popularity?
Yep.
I'm not entirely sure that you're right. Let me just read to you something that Sean Carney wrote, and just in passing. This was something that came from this morning. I just want to make sure I've got the right thing and not the Curry piece, which seems to go on and on. So where have we got Carney? Where are we? Give me 1 minute to get it right. Here we go. Sean Carney. Of the question of blame attribution towards the Prime Minister, he said, is that fair? The father, Sajid Akram, who arrived here in 1998 when John Howard was Prime Minister, and his son Naveed Akram, who was born here, were on the radar of security services as far back as 2019, certainly Naveed Akram was, because of the son's activities and jihadist connections. Those are well known. It led to the self-proclaimed leader of IS in Australia being jailed for 4.5 years, and Naveed Akram was an associate of his. Naveed was investigated and Sajid was interviewed. We know that. We don't know what assessments were made, and this is something that I'll get back to in a minute. Naveed Akram was deemed not to be a threat. At the time, Scott Morrison was Prime Minister and Peter Dutton the Home Affairs Minister. Sajid Akram was keen on guns. His gun licence application lapsed in 2015. He applied for a licence again in 2020 and was granted it in 2023. Lots of red lights going off there. 3 years for a firearms license to be approved. Carney goes on to say there is also the attempt to sheet home to Albanese indirect responsibility for the burning of a synagogue. And this that occurred in Melbourne's Adass Synagogue in 2024. It has been regularly cited by the government's critics as the harbinger of Bondi, part of a continuum of escalating offences. But it was not, according to the security authorities, a product of locally generated anti-Semitism. And as we know, Carney says, that was our intelligence agency, ASIO, determined that was essentially the planned work of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So these mistakes were made on other governments' watches, Jack. And
I'm not putting all the blame on Anthony Albanese. I think, but I do think that October 7 was one of those watershed moments where particularly a Prime Minister needs to step up or they fail, and he failed.
All right. Well, we're going to have a look at some of the other failures. We've talked about some of the rhetoric that's been going around and how that should have been jumped on. It should have been jumped on by just about everybody, and it really wasn't at the time. It wasn't a big kerfuffle. The quote that I attributed to Jenny Leong that appeared in the Times of Israel, but it didn't really get much of a run here. But let's look at some of these failures. So I don't want to get transfixed about guns. But the gun that was wrenched from the hands of Sajid Akram by our hero was a semi-automatic shotgun. Now, in order to have that gun, he would need licence B and C categories in a New South Wales firearms licence. He had an AB, that's what we've been told by police. So there are questions there about how he was able to obtain that firearm. Now, there's a black market for these things. We know that goes under the radar. But if he was able to purchase this firearm, he clearly did not have a license to do so. And just to explain to our listeners, when you do either sell or purchase a firearm as a licensed firearm user, there's a paper trail. You have to complete a document in order to do that. The first time you purchase a weapon, there'll be a 28-day wait. But beyond that, the guns just would go from hand to hand. But there is a paper trail. And again, we're just not hearing anything about this. If mistakes have been made by licensing, let's hear them. Let's be honest about this. Let's be honest about the mistakes that have been made. And then we get to the ASIO stuff. Naveed Akram being assessed, which obviously involves interviews with the family, including his father, Sajid. What were those assessments? Why don't we know this now? We should be hearing this now, because if our agencies have made mistakes, let them fess up to them. Let them tell the community, let them tell the Australian community broadly and the Australian Jewish community around Bondi and around the country if there are perceived risks continuing, if there are real risks continuing. And so they at least, Jewish people in this country do not feel safe, and I can understand that. So the first step in making them feel safe is to at least communicate effectively with them where mistakes were made, how they will fix them. Are there manpower issues? Are there talent and experience issues? I'm hearing from the Australian Federal Police, this article ran in the paper, a retired counter-terrorism agent there for the AFP says that the majority of the AFP's counter-terrorism unit is full of guys fresh out of the academy. Counter-terrorism investigations, that's kind of like the pinnacle of detective work, and you need experienced people in that place, these places.
Can I just say something about the Jewish community in Australia? They've put up with a lot for a long time. It's been for the last 30 years in Bondi, in that eastern suburbs area. And, you and I have both lived in it. It runs from Moriah College, Australia's biggest Jewish school, right through to the harbour and the Pacific. Every Jewish institution there for 30 years, every synagogue, every school, every Jewish aged care home has had armed guards out the front for 30 years. We've put up with this. No other community in Australia has had to put up with that, right? That means we've failed because successive governments have failed to make the point to the wider community that you do not bring old hatreds into our country. If you migrate to our country, you do not bring the old hatreds with you. That's just not acceptable. It's contrary to everything that made Australia what it is today. And we haven't made that point. Not just one government, but a whole lot of governments are guilty of that.
I think that's a fair point. That level of security's probably been there for longer than 30.
Well, to my certain knowledge, 30 anyway, you know.
Well, there was the Hanukkah bombing in 1982. There was a car bomb that discharged and damaged a number of vehicles outside and caused damage to the Hanukkah club.
Hanukkah, for listeners, being the Jewish soccer club, right?
Right. So that's in Bondi. So there was a car bomb that exploded in 1982. There was an attack, a simultaneous, more or less simultaneous attack on the Israeli consulate at that time. So we're going back 43 years, Jack, just on those two offences alone. My wife used to have the Hanukkah club on her key ring because she was a member of the Hanukkah club in Bondi, now I think defunct. It has gone, right. I mean, I as you say, I lived in North Bondi for a couple of years, raised my young family there and loved the place. Most Saturday nights you'd see Jewish residents of the suburb, walking their families, pushing prams and so forth around the place. And I don't know how recent a phenomenon this is, but I drove around Bondi last year, and I was actually quite shocked to see the state of schools, Jewish schools in the place, because wrapped in razor wire and these sorts of things. You're right; these are signs that everything was poor, that things were not right, and it may have been as little as abuse coming from a car, as unpalatable and unpleasant as that is, or to serious attacks, trying to prevent serious attacks on students and others. I was quite shocked by it, and it is that is a sign of failure.
I was talking to a Jewish friend a couple, both separately went down and visited Jewish communities in Sydney and Melbourne. And when they came back and I was talking to them, I was kind of surprised at what they told me. They said that the Jewish community there are starting to look around as to where else they can go, that they no longer felt safe. And I'm going back 6 months, 12 months. They no longer felt safe in Australia. That's a damning disgrace for Australia. If the Jews aren't safe in Australia, where are they going to go?
Absolutely right. And I just don't know. We've got. I think where perhaps the Albanese government is a little bit vulnerable is from Segal's recommendations on anti-Semitism. They haven't been acted on nearly quickly enough, have they?
I'm not sure they're much good. I'm not sure they're much good, to be honest, but they haven't been acted on, no.
I guess we're getting back to another point that there'll be some, particularly when we talk about firearms licensing and things like that, there'll be knee-jerk reactions that will not lead to good outcomes. I think there's another potential problem there. But what I would like to hear from our agencies, particularly ASIO, is to say how this happened.
Yes. And people are very forgiving of someone making a mistake. But what they're unforgiving is if you don't tell them that you've made the mistake.
Exactly right. It's so, and it is so important to be public and transparent right now and accountable. That I want to hear from Burgess. I want to hear from the AFP Commissioner. I think the New South Wales Police Commissioner, fairly new into the job, has been okay, but I want to hear from these guys because clearly there are failures all the way to these two. Naveed and Sajid Akram going to the Philippines, flying then traceably to Davao and to the island of Mindanao and to the region of Mindanao. Apparently they barely left their room in the hotel. They pop out every now and then. All very strange stuff. also, Jack, the arsenal that Sajid Akram had, probably somewhere in the order of $30,000 worth of weaponry. Flying to the Philippines, talk at least from the mother about scuba diving and all this sort of stuff. Unemployed bricklayer for a son, and a humble fruit shop owner from the father. So where's the money coming from?
And haven't you got 30K worth of firearms tucked under the bed?
Well, you know, that gun that was wrestled from Sajid Akram's arms, I went into it probably too much, but it is a semi-automatic shotgun. It is limited for sale to civilians in Australia, and one in the chamber and 5 in the tube or magazine. Looked to me like there were more shots than that fired without a reload from that particular weapon. And so therefore, I mean, you can get, again, these things can be done on the black market. It's an extension of a tube. Law enforcement use this type of gun, particularly tactical police in Australia, and they will extend the magazine to perhaps 7+1 or 9+1. But only 5+1. So there are problems with the licensing, right? Fess up to them. You know, I get the feeling when we're talking about firearms licensing, whenever these things arise, and God forbid someone should say, oh, let's have a national firearms database. Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, we've talked about that many, many times now. But I get the impression in New South Wales, God forbid some of the other lesser states, shall we say, that someone's flipping through an A4 folder of carbonised paper. And I know that that's a problem. They haven't, you know, in other states that they haven't digitised this stuff. So this needs to be fixed, and whatever sum of money needs to be attached to it needs to be spent.
Was your first motorcar licence a little piece of paper on?
Yeah, but you know, it's 2025, Jack.
Yes, I know. Yeah, which brings us to the question of what do we do next? Now, there's been a lot of talk about the gun laws, and I'm nowhere near as well versed in what they are than you are, and I'll break my usual habit and defer to your greater knowledge.
Oh, Jesus,
I won't make a
glad we're recording.
I won't make a habit of it. Don't worry. The hate speech, and people are talking about the hate speech laws. I just don't think they work. In fact, I think they're very often counterproductive. If you say to people that you can't express a political opinion, you drive it underground and you make it more dangerous. That's my personal view about that.
I think you're right there too. So we're glad that we're recording my whole agreement there.
Yeah, where I think a line's got to be drawn is when something that's said is an incitement to violence. And that's always been an offence, and it should remain one, and it needs to be prosecuted.
It may need to be a little bit tweaked as well, Jack, because incitement laws are very difficult to prosecute, which means prosecutors are not going to pursue them as a rule.
Yes.
But if there's some tweaking there, it needs to be done.
Yeah.
But let it be done.
Yeah, but we need the distinction between political criticism, say a political criticism of the Israeli Defence Force and kill the IDF.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at those particular protests, and we talked about the October 9 one, these have to be operational decisions made by police on the ground, because the worst thing, and you know how crowd control works in broad terms, you know, if you have police just weighing in and arresting someone, that can make that crowd and protesters pretty much always outnumber police. That can make that crowd, you know, act in a way that it might otherwise not, you know, in a hostile, aggressive way, and then threats to police. So the police need to say, what are the safety issues for the community? And these are decisions made in a heartbeat. And what about the safety of our officers? And then do we go in? And I think those things sort of have to be respected as well.
They do, but they have to be balanced with this, that with the people you're dealing with the protesters you're dealing with, If they think they can do this with impunity, you create a further problem.
Yeah. Okay. The thing I hate about this most, Jack, I mean, there's obviously been loss of life, absolutely harrowing imagery, a real sense of betrayal among our Jewish community that they had not been listened to, that they've been saying for some time now that they do not feel safe in our country and in that little part of the world, that famous part of the world. The thing I hate most of it, Jack, is that it will always be staying now. This beautiful place, Bondi Beach, which is kind of a rite of passage to go there if you're from Australia, if you're other parts of Australia, if you're from other parts of the world, that it will always now be stained as the location of a massacre. And that really bothers me.
I first spent a bit of time there in the mid-90s, and it was a beguiling mix of – there's still lots of Kiwis who were over here kind of backpackering, really.
Yeah, a lot of backpackers there, of course.
A lot of working class people, a lot of old Australian working class.
Always had been a working class suburb, of course, yeah.
It's much more gentrified now. There were some very, very large Kiwi fellows in every pub selling drugs, as I recall. Mainly Kiwis, but
I think the Bondi Police had a bit of a role to play in that too. Going back a few years, Jack, if you remember the Frenchman who was shot dead in the waves by police, a number of officers there were involved in cocaine distribution.
Yeah, there was no shortage of cocaine around in those days. I can tell you that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But of course, I'm sure it's changed now. I mean, places like the ACOA club's now a block of flats, like everything else in Hong Kong. Bondi is a block of flats, you know.
Yeah.
But a fabulous place, but very kind of open to anyone and anything, really, while still maintaining a particularly Jewish kind of undertone. You know, it was a notably Jewish area, but a very relaxed and open sort of place. And if that's been lost, that would be an awful, awful thing. It's not comparable to the 15 people who lost their lives, but it is a loss nevertheless. Yeah.
Of course. Yes, I just hate the fact that these bastards, the father and son, have basically spilt blood in this extraordinary place.
The only bright spot for me was at all was the fact that the policeman who started the beginning of the end, it was a middle-aged chap with a white shirt and tie on,
10 years of copper.
15, I think, looking like he's half a dozen jam donuts above his best playing weight, a real old-fashioned copper. So this wasn't fixed. The beginning of the end didn't come from new gun laws, hate speech laws, or some special procedure that the police had to follow because someone's designed it at a workshop. It was just an old-fashioned copper who said, we've got a problem here, I can fix it.
Yes, and we do want to talk about police response because, you know, there were police officers who were not on duty who threw their uniforms on and made their way down to North Bondi, and that particular fellow is a real hero as well. The first thing I want to talk about, Jack, is as a procedural matter, why were police not issued long guns?
Because don't know the answer to that.
You're basically firing against them with a pea shooter. So these are another little steps that need to be looked at. Now, what we have heard is that there are only 3 police at the Bondi police station. Now, Bondi police station is not a major police station. I remember ringing them up about a matter in Bondi Junction where we had people living above us, sort of backpackers, about 4 floors, and they were they threw a shopping trolley over the balcony and it just crashed into the mall. I thought, gee, we should better ring the police about this. And I rang them up and explained the situation, shopping trolley overboard, crashing into a mall 100 metres below. And they said, gee, yeah, that really does sound dangerous. And I said, well, yeah.
Mm.
And they went, well, there's not much we can do about it now that it's been done. And that was the end. So I sort of, I'll never contact Bondi Police Station again. But it is not a major police station. I think people are sort of missing that point, that there's Rose Bay and then there's Maroubra. They are the sort of command level places. So it's not unusual for 3 police to be on duty at a relatively minor police station, not part of the local area command headquarters. But I do think there is something to be said about the issue of long arms. Very brave people, including El Ahmed, took on guys with long guns. If you're firing at them with handguns, it's a piece. You're going to get outranged. You're going to get outpowered, etc. It takes great bravery just to approach them. But yeah, I think that's something that they also need to look at, the issue of long guns for police in the event of matters like that. I don't see too many problems in terms of what happened on the ground with police. I don't see that there were mistakes made there, and of course we do have a number of police who were wounded. And I don't see any problems there. I thought, El Ahmed, our new hero, Jack, Syrian-born police officer, living here on some sort of protective visa, I presume, and desperate to get his citizenship. And I believe his parents are now in the country. They were sort of looking to come to Australia. What will happen to him, Jack? He's a tobacconist. Someone said to me that the initial reports were that he was a fruit shop owner too. And then someone said to me, no, he's a tobacconist. And I said, well, he was already my hero. Anyway, so he will receive Australian citizenship as will his elderly parents. And so he should. What he did, I mean, man, the bottle on that guy to attack a large human being who was heavily armed, extraordinary stuff.
If he's a tobacconist, are you putting him up for New South Welshman of the Year?
I think you might find, without knowing anything about that particular tobacconist shop, they might just have been involved in getting a little bit of leaf out the door, not strictly kosher, so to speak. So, what he did is just quite remarkable, and he deserves all the rewards and kudos that comes his way. But there are many very, very brave people. There were people at the Hanukkah event lying on top of their spouses, lying on top of their children to protect them. And there were other civilians.
The elderly Jewish couple who tried to stop it before it started.
Yes, and they were shot dead. So remarkable stories of heroism. And we can't forget those things either. In fact, they're really important to remember, because that is essentially, we can talk about Australian values, that is essentially a human value, that when you see someone in trouble, you try and help. And hopefully, if we promote this well, that will continue to be the case.
The reason I raised Australian values in relation to this in particular is because Australia's always been a multicultural and migrant country. The multiculturalism didn't start in the 1950s. If you think about it, even the English people who arrived in Australia were kind of multicultural. You had Northern English people and Southern English people who wouldn't normally meet each other except with a large object in their hand to belt the crap out of each other, right? Living side by side. That's always been the case. And part of the understanding, it's sort of an unwritten understanding of that, is that we don't bring old enmities with us. Right?
I think that's really important. And that is something that should be promoted to anyone who wishes to become an Australian, anyone who wishes to come to this country, even as a tourist, but certainly looking for resident status and citizenship down the track. That should just be hammered home on a daily basis. Your religious, cultural, ethnic feuds going back centuries do not belong here.
Yeah. when we talk about what we do next, I think that's more important than the hate speech laws or the gun laws. I think it's hammering that home. It's
just
putting
wanna-
that foremost
Sorry.
in our culture again, right? It used to be part of our culture. We had that. We kept hammering that during the 1950s and 60s. And yes, there were problems. There were problems with from
Oh,
the
the
former
Balkans.
from the former Yugoslavia, but it was pushed and pushed and pushed, and people were told, if you come here, you cannot bring that old
I
enmity
think
with
there
you.
was some pretty slippery stuff on behalf of our agencies at the time.
Yes.
So we are dealing with, when we come to the agencies, when we come to people like Mike Burgess, we are dealing with people who are not given to be open and frank and speak honestly in public, but they need to make that change. I just want to really quickly just touch on the Segal strategy for reducing anti-Semitism. Jack, can you give me just a quick coverall of what that might mean if it is implemented? I know there's an educational element.
Yeah,
and I know
I
there's a
kind
sort
of
of
lost
legal
track of it.
element.
I kind of lost track of it. I thought it was a word salad, to be quite honest. I thought Kamala Harris might have written it. So I can't.
That's not fair.
Not fair to Gillian Segal or not fair to Kamala Harris?
I think probably both.
I couldn't give you a pot of it didn't make much sense at all to me.
All right.
To me it was window dressing.
Yeah. All right. Deeply harrowing event in Sydney, and like most people who live in Australia, and I guess Australians around the world, people around the world, just this, this sense of nausea. I was texting people back and forth about guns and this, that, and the other, and trying to help out some of our journalists with a bit of information, and then it popped up. 12 dead. And there are 15 dead now, but there were 12 dead announced probably about 10 o'clock on the Sunday night. And I just had to stop and go, oh my God, 12 people dead. And it was that moment where you're sort of not a journalist, you're just a human being going, oh, this is dreadful. This is dreadful. All right, moving on to other matters. We'll quickly go around the world with
Can
news.
we just mention the National Cabinet before we leave?
Oh,
this?
Yes, I think that is worthwhile. Yeah, good on you, Jack. Yeah, so let's wrap up this topic.
What was
on this.
that about? I looked at.
Well, the National Cabinet meets every week. Well, bloody well should. But in that, nothing really happened. It was just, what do we do? Well, no, not what do we do? We'll just have a chat and then won't do anything. So obviously the federal government can't do much about gun laws. I mean, it needs to cooperate with the states and territories on that. It probably meant that there should have been some form of statement coming from the cabinet, Jack. But again,
otherwise,
sort of
why
came
are they
and went
there?
with nothing. And
Yes.
yeah, that was a bit odd. I just think, look, we do know that the Prime Minister is by nature a very cautious leader, and I think sometimes he becomes overly cautious when it comes to major events in the country, and his instincts should be to be in front of a camera and be talking to people, be talking to the nation, reassuring them, but being honest about what has happened, and saying that there will be a full investigation so we can find out what the faults are and fix them.
Yeah, you might actually
never
say
be perfect. I mean, Burke made the point. Yes, look, the ASIO can never be all-seeing, I think he said. Well, we don't expect security agencies to be omniscient, but we do expect a certain standard to be held. And with a person who was assessed, well, both people were assessed by ASIO. They have, they could easily be bluffed and bullshitted out of the way. But then 2 years later, one of them obtains a license to possess 6 long guns.
I mean, we don't want
failure. Got written all over it.
We don't want ASIO to have those sort of powers. They'll become the Stasi. We don't want to live like that.
We don't, but we want to make sure that they are resourced well enough and have experienced personnel, data analysts and things like that to say, whoa, here we go. And it's not a big thing. I mean, in the context of this is a tactical response at that particular house. Weapons seized and problem largely solved. Just imagine if that had have happened sometime before Sunday.
So we don't want the Stasi. So that means we want something much less than that. But we want it to be competent.
Yeah,
but we want it to be open enough to admit when it's made a mistake. Because if you don't get the Stasi, sometimes things will get through. And people will say, well, that's a price we've got to pay for freedom and for some degree of liberty in our country. But they've got to be open with this. They've got to tell us what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We are in total agreement there. We will go around the world now very quickly with some news that you may not have heard, perhaps apropos of what we've been discussing. The nation of Austria has banned headscarves for all females in schools under the age of 14. It's part of an ongoing push. Denmark, I think Spain, and France, of course.
France has had them for a long time.
But
they don't really enforce them.
It's a law, but it's not observed. We went through it actually. The number of fines have been issued just minuscule. Right?
Yeah.
China will impose a 13% tax on condoms and other contraceptives to boost fertility. The one-child policy is well and truly dead.
It's about 40 years too late, I think.
Denmark has named the US as a national security risk, Jack. Don't pick on Greenland or we're coming for you. The US government has removed fossil fuels from its website as a cause, where they were described as a cause of climate change. Everything's going a bit mad there. Don't know if you saw the presidential portrait of Barack Obama in the White House, Jack. And now there's a little scree underneath it written by presumably Donald Trump or one of his minions that says he's a terrible human being and did horrible things. And it's just, God, you guys will get to Donald Trump and Rob Reiner fairly soon. Reddit has filed suit against the under-16 social media ban in Australia. That's been widely known for a little while. It wasn't known in this country. Be very interesting to see how they get on. Reddit is probably not the right platform to be doing this because they are wide open in publishing some stuff that should never be published. Yes. Anyway, moving on, Venezuela, Jack, was prepared to withdraw from the ICC. That's not the Cricket Association. That is the International Criminal Court. The South American country has rejected the accusations brought before the court against its leadership. In November 2021, the ICC opened an investigation into the Maduro government for allegedly carrying out crimes against humanity, including torture, sexual violence, and other instances of inhumane treatment. Venezuela, for its part, signed onto the Rome Statute for the ICC in October 1998 and ratified the treaty in June 2000. And now, because it's getting a little bit too close for comfort, a little bit too close to home, the Maduro regime is jumping out of the ICC. We'll make it a bit easier to travel around the world for them. Not that Maduro will be doing a lot of travelling right now, I wouldn't have thought. He has been invited over to the United States, of course.
It would be a long trip. A long holiday there. In a nutshell, that just encompasses what the limitations of international law are.
Yeah, exactly right. Even if you're a signatory and you have ratified the treaty, you can drop out at any time. Ireland, Jack, increases its military spending by 55%. Neutral and poorly armed. This is in Politico, I think. Long viewed as Europe's blind spot. Announced Thursday it will spend €1.7 billion on improved military equipment, capabilities and facilities to deter drones and potential Russian sabotage of undersea cables. The 5-year plan.
That's the important thing. The one important thing Ireland has. From the time
strategically, of the first, it has enormous value.
Yeah, but from the time the first a telegraph cable was run across the Atlantic. It went through Ireland, and they all still do. So that's the single greatest importance that of Ireland in a geostrategic sense are the cables.
The cables. So 1.7 billion euro. So they, if we want to just do the back of the envelope maths, they were spending around about $1 billion, €1 billion a year on their military, which isn't a lot. So they've got a 5-year plan together. They've got a defence minister, Helen McEntee, and they're throwing some money, rather like the Germans, who are really investing substantially in their military. And finally, as we go around the world, Russia plans to ban incoming calls from unfriendly countries. And I quote Vlad the Impaler now, within this framework, the blocking of calls made from the territory of unfriendly states with criminal intent, the labelling of calls and additional requirements regarding the conduct of those working in communication with state bodies. You would tell him to shut up at this point, but it's prohibited. But he keeps going. Towards customers are envisaged. The government takes all these proposals into account and implements them, he said. So soon we won't be able to ring Russia.
Which are the countries that are not unfriendly?
It's one of those things, Jack. If we talk about scammers are appropriating, and it happens. I'm not quite sure what responsibility the telecommunications company should have, but they are able to acquire mobile numbers and things like that. So there's a pretty easy way to get around this. So it sounds like Vlad's talking tough, which he loves to do, but that time he was talking tough and long, and I'm sure everyone pretended they were listening when he spoke.
And we wouldn't want the poor Russian people to be deprived of the opportunity to talk to a Nigerian prince.
Well, indeed. One of the great scamming nations is Ukraine, Jack. Indian call centres, Ukraine call centres for most of Northern Europe. All right, moving on. Rob Reiner, terribly tragic. He and his wife have been found murdered, and their son, I think at least Rob's son, has been taken into custody. A very, very sad business. He had a history of violence and I presume mental health problems.
He did. In fact, they made a movie about it. He and his father made a movie about it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that film, but I had seen the references to it. And, it's a terribly sad business when these things occur, and the son will wake up from some psychotic event and realise what he has done. And Rob Reiner is...
if you just run through a little list of what he's done, he directed When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me, Princess Bride, This Is Spinal Tap, and A Few Good Men. And A Few Good Men. And if you'd done nothing else with your life, you'd be pretty damn happy with that as a list, wouldn't you?
Well, there was a period of time there where he just had hit after hit after hit, and just significant films as well. I do listen to the All Is Entertainment, I think that's what it's called, with Marina Hyde and Richard something or other. And
Richard Glover?
No, not Richard Glover. No, we're talking about an English podcast about celebrity and what have you.
This is Marina Hyde, the very amusing
and the producer and occasional host and presenter. Richard, he's a novelist as well. He's a man who you sort of look at him and go, hey, you are the busiest man on the planet.
I just wonder how someone as funny as Marina Hyde got into the door at the Guardian. Normally they run the Ernesto meter off the dial there.
Well, I think she just became so popular, Jack, that she couldn't be ignored. She is one of the finest columnists in the world at the moment. But anyway, in this podcast, it was Richard, whose name I'll get for you, listeners. He listed his top directors, what he called the Dakota presidential
the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, he did his directors Mount Rushmore, and he had Rob Reiner in it. No Scorsese, but Rob Reiner was in it, and he said in explaining it that that he just put hit after hit after hit out there, but all substantial films, never a sort of budget thing. And they'd only just concluded, well, they were just in the middle of post-production for the Spinal Tap 2, the sequel to the original, and now that's sort of the next big thing. But anyone who'd ever seen the genius of Spinal Tap, my Lord, what an extraordinary thing it was. There was a lovely piece published in the Australian about how Hollywood wasn't terribly interested in it at all, but Reiner was able to obtain the money and get rolling with it, and really it became a form now known as mockumentary. But that was they were the first. Rob was the first one to do it. And, it's just an extraordinary thing and very, very sad. Now, what on earth is Donald Trump doing? Reiner
Just before we go there, I think a measure of your cultural impact is when one line from one of your movies stays in the culture. He's got many from his movies, right? But it goes up to 11 is the number one in my hit parade.
Goes to 11.
Yeah.
The rest is entertainment. Richard Osman, folks. I do apologise for my terrible memory, but yes, he had him on his Mount Rushmore of movies.
Now get back into Trump because he deserves a kicking for this.
Oh, it's just awful. It just shows what a thin-skinned, petty little man he is. His issued a statement on the deaths. I mean, this is not the trouble. This is not an isolated event. I mean, this happens whenever one of his perceived enemies has some problems, and he referred to him as a great movie maker, but a terrible human being, and it was as if Rob Reiner had deserved his fate. It was just so appalling. Really, that man is sick, and copped a lot of flack. I don't know if you saw James Wood, Jack, who's a pro-Trump guy and pretty active on social media.
Certainly a conservative. He's pro-Trump about a lot of things, but not about everything, right?
Not about everything. He's a very bright bloke, James Wood.
Yes, he is.
Politics don't suit me, but a very bright bloke. Who's probably his days as an actor are sort of past. He still does a little bit of work, but yeah, he came to the defence of the Reiner family, and sort of sat
and Reiner himself. He said Reiner had picked him up at a time when things were a bit tough for him, and helped him get back on his feet, and that he thought that. And James Wood didn't like Rob Reiner's politics all that much, but he thought that he was a good man.
And he said, "Look, we don't have to hate people we disagree with. This is such an important point to make.
Yes.
We don't have to hate people we disagree with."
Yes.
So, and I thought, those were great words.
Put that in the grade 1 curriculum, I think, just to try and emphasize and have it in every year. Would make the schools work better.
Reiner actually came from Rob Reiner, of course, came from a very storied family in Hollywood. His father, Carl Reiner, was one of the great comedians in Hollywood days. You're a great friend of Mel Brooks. Of course, Mel's still around. Carl left us a couple of years ago. Mel Brooks may be out here at the moment. I haven't heard from Mel. He's 100 now, but they are doing Spaceballs 2, and that is being filmed in Australia. So he may well be in Australia, but he would be, pretty elderly, so travel might be a bit of an issue. There was a lovely episode.
Rob Reiner told a great story about what it was like growing up in the Carl Reiner household.
Yeah, and there are comedians everywhere.
Yeah, he said, and he ran through a list of this would be a Sunday afternoon. He ran through a list, Mel Brooks, etc., etc., etc. He said it made going round to other people's houses a bit dull, really. nowhere near as funny, you know.
There's a moment there in the series that Seinfeld did called Getting Coffee with Comedians in Cars. I think it's close enough to the title. And they do Carl Reiner, and he does call it Carl Reiner, and they go to Reiner. Seinfeld goes to Reiner's place, and Mel Brooks is there. And it turns out that every Wednesday night, Mel Brooks would turn up, and they would watch a movie together, have a meal, and watch a movie together, and as Mel Brooks described, fall asleep by 8:30, the pair of them. And then while this was all going on, Mel Brooks just sort of descended into stand-up comedy all of a sudden. Every Jewish joke you can imagine rolled from his lips. These people are treasures, you know. The Brooke family is another one that were part of this group, and I did see Seinfeld basically acknowledging and expressing sympathy for the death of Rob Reiner. He said Seinfeld would never have been made without him. Larry David has issued various statements about just what a good man he was. So deeply loved in that sort of circuit of Jewish comedy, of Jewish comedians in Hollywood and around television, going back really to the beginning of television, Jack. That's the family. All right. Well, now one of the serious. It seems that we're recording. I'll keep going. We've got a little bit of a pop up there saying it wasn't.
I don't think it's a failure. I just think this is where it's going to end up.
And one of the great contentious issues of our time between Hong Kong Jack and myself.
We're following customers to where the market is. We're going to build up a whole line of hybrids.
I'll just keep talking because it might just resolve at your end while we speak, Jack. So, electric vehicles you've got here are hybrids of the future. And this relates to
gas because it's got
a bit of news coming from Ford CEO
and the electric
Farley
capacity as well.
And they are going to sort of restructure their F-150s. Have you seen an F-150 on the road recently, Jack? Monstrous bloody things. I don't think they're the biggest, but gee, they're close. They're like tanks, you know. When you drive up there with a 4-cylinder car, it's like a tank. And now, so Ford are going to turn the F-150 back to a hybrid, or in fact into a hybrid. I don't know that there was ever a hybrid version around. Is this conclusive evidence, Jack, of the failure of electric vehicles around the world? Battery, yeah. Yeah, I actually would disagree. I think and I own one. I was just sitting next to, parked out the window there. Hybrids tend to be, I would think, a sort of transition type technology. That's my view of it. My brother-in-law and his partner, they drove up to Sydney from central Victoria and came to visit us on the way back, and they have a BMW electric vehicle. And I asked, just about the logistics, because one of the reasons I bought a hybrid was because I don't think the infrastructure in Australia is there yet in terms of travelling reasonably long distances. Brett told me that basically, they have a bit of a deal. I think NRMA, RACV, they can free charge with them as a part of the purchase of the vehicle. So they opted for those more often than not, and it was costing him nothing, basically nothing to drive around Australia, which is quite extraordinary. But they would still have to look for these NRMA charges or RACV charges. So from the Highlands, they would recharge, not quite at Gundagai. They could go to Gundagai, but Gundagai's not the most salubrious place on earth. Charge there in Cooliac, then move down and get off the Hume and charge there before they got home. I don't know that the infrastructure's there. The first thing you'll find is that the fast chargers, the ones that can get you up and running in about 20 minutes to half an hour, depending on the vehicle you drive,
we're about to have it.
They are the ones that break down first.
We'll be able to have
and
it.
very
At least,
often
and we can argue about.
we'll find that the retailers will turn them off because of the cost
not that
in
we're ever short
electricity
of something to argue
to the
about,
retailer.
but just in case,
so whether it's a service station,
even in our
whatever it
building
is.
here, I think it's about
So
50
yeah, that's
old. They're
what sort of
putting
guided
in,
my decision in buying hybrid, not
infrastructure
an
to charge
EV. I think my
things in
next
the car
car will be
park,
an
yeah.
EV in a couple of years'
I
time.
was in a Maxis
But
taxi.
just
It's
to
a
give
new
us an
Chinese
idea,
brand,
Jack and I had
the other day.
bet on this
and I
over a lunch, but we
said
can't
to the
remember
driver,
what
I
the
said,
terms
"Mate,
are.
Congratulations. I said, are these things
We
expensive?
can't
He said,
remember.
"Oh,
But what I
400
can say, and I
thousand
don't think this
Hong
was the
Kong dollars."
tipping point for the
I
bet,
said,
but
well, it's
the
amazing.
global
I thought
EV
the
sales
Tesla was
surged
the
by
least
40%
comfortable
in
car
the
to
third
ride around in
quarter,
the back seat of, but you've
reaching
actually outdone them,
18%
you know,
of all
and,
new car
they're
sales,
dreadful,
up from
but-
14% in 2022. Which is a fast transition. Petrol car
At
decline.
BYD.
Sales of traditional internal combustion engine cars are shrinking, down significantly over the past few years. Globally, we've got over the year a 20% share of all new vehicles
He's
purchased. So that just gives us an idea. And if we ever can think of what the terms are for the lunch,
he's
I
probably lucky he
demand
got
that you pay for it.
Yeah. Well, 400's, 50,000 Hong Kong Australia dollars. So.
Right.
Yes.
I got into is it a BFD? BYD, yes, thank you. And it was a sort of top of it was an Uber, and it was sort of top of the range thing. And I felt like I was on stage, there were lights everywhere and different
I reckon he's about
colours
4 lengths in front.
fluctuating and all this sort of. I
and
got to
not gonna
say,
get run down.
I was talking to the driver. I said, I could drive one of these, no problems at all. When I did look at the price, about 80 in Australia, that top of the range sort of BYD. The price variation is really not there much anymore. So I was looking at, I was talking to my mate about EVs and looked at Toyota's model. It's about 10,000 above the standard hybrid, the standard EV model that they have.
Keep her
So
job.
not a big difference these days.
Would be the only
All
objective
right,
she's
let's
got.
speculate.
Elbow, I always
here.
think
Which
of as kind of the
politician had the
Stephen
worst
Bradbury
year?
of
We've got it
Australian
listed
politics.
here.
You know,
Jack threw in
he
the
first went into
German
government in
president, Angela
2007,
Merkel,
he
hadn't
asked
been a
his cabinet
politician for
colleagues, will
20
this man
years,
ever be
just
Prime Minister?
because
They'd
he's
have
got a
laughed
plan
at
a
you.
year. So we're scrapping that.
Politics is about chance and endurance,
Let's
and
run
he
through
made
it. Trump, Macron, Starmer,
What can
Elba,
really? I
Lees,
don't think
Putin.
Lees. She can just keep
Who's had
putting
the worst?
one
You'd have
foot
to
in front
say.
of the other and
Out
hope
of
that she
the blocks,
stays in
you'd
the
have to
job
put
long
Sir
enough
Keir
before we
Starmer
get rid of her.
nice and high on that list.
I think she'd be lucky to survive as leader for the year.
Yeah,
Starmer wins
Trump,
for me because
Trump's certainly been faltering
he's
in the last
taken
6
a
months.
stonking great majority and no
Macron
need
has
for
had his
another
problems,
election.
but still continues to be an
2008 or
authority
something.
figure, if not necessarily a popular
and
one. Elbow
what
won an
ought to be an
election.
unassailable position,
And
he's turned himself into
approval
someone who'll
ratings
be lucky
as
to
they
see
stand
the
and
year
polling
out
position is
as
very,
leader.
very strong.
Just amazing.
I think also we'd have a look at the opposition
I've never seen
leader.
anyone.
What's going to be her objectives for next year, Jack?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Howard was right when he got the leadership the second time, and he said, "I think the times will suit him," and the times did suit him. But he was, he was sharp and shrewd at
I think
keeping
so.
his
I think
finger
you're
on the
right.
pulse.
I
really.
don't think he'll make it to the end of next year. That would be my guess. In regard to Elbow, I think Elbow, we're finding that this sort of so-called left faction progressive is actually quite a cautious human being, and I think he's learned a lot about politics along the way, and I think he learned a lot from the Howard years too, Jack, that you don't have to be necessarily popular, but you've got to have a really good feel for what's going on in the nation at any time. And I think Howard had that. The demographics have very much changed. It's a younger electorate than it was in Howard's time. And Howard dominated that sort of 55 plus demographic, 65 if you like, but the elder voters in the country. And Albanese has...
She needs someone
it
in
was
her
that
office
sense
just to
of
tidy that
what
up.
is the
Just
electorate
put some
thinking
structure
at
into the place.
moment. You know, you remember the barbecue stoppers and all this sort of stuff they used to talk about. I think Albo has a really, really strong view, like Howard, that he does have a good sense of what's going on in the country. When it comes to Lee's, the opposition leader, Jack, her statement in the wake of the Bondi massacre was one of support. That the coalition would offer the government
6 months to get the economy going the way
unerring
he says
support. Then
it is now.
Following day, she started issuing another statement, which was a complete turnaround, talking about how they want to avoid knee-jerk reactions
but he's
in
not
terms
on the
of gun
ticket
licensing and what have you.
in a sense.
And then another message on the third day, which was another thing, and then there was something else from one of her colleagues yesterday, and it was just like, you know, you're talking, your messaging is just all over the place, and that's something she needs to fix. All right, okay, Jack. What can you look forward to in terms of world events? I presume in the year 2026, soon to be upon us. What you got for us? Are the Dems going to win the midterms? Are they going to get a majority in the House and the Senate?
Well, for years now, every time he says something about those distracting weird things, they've all jumped all over him. They just can't. They just can't.
If you had a
help
look at his
themselves.
approval ratings,
if they could just stop
Jack,
doing that, they'd be much better off.
No, I know, but he's worse than Biden. Worse than Biden was, and Biden was deeply unpopular. We know that, and so it's going to make it very, very difficult. I would not want to make a prediction on how the Democrats are
would you like
going to go next year,
going into
particularly
the
around the midterms.
Listen,
Hakeem Jeffries seems
I wouldn't
to have
mind 6 months in Adelaide. I think I should be down there
a little bit more focused
providing
in the House
special
this
coverage
time
of the
as
election.
well.
You wouldn't get a good response, would you?
Over healthcare.
Yeah.
And just in recent times, they need to have a bit of focus, and that focus, as we've discussed many, many times, has got to be really the economy, spending, cost of living, jobs, and leave the sort of the weird stuff, the distractions that Trump deliberately puts out there, flooding the zone, if you like.
Yeah, a long way out, but it's
they all get sucked in. Yeah. We probably should have had a little bit of a flip into what elections we have, but we know that there will be one in South Australia early next year in March.
And besides, I think it's not just Alan who's on the nose; it's the whole government. If you go back to 2007, when Labor changed leader, Labor got a spike in the polls when Rudd became leader. Rudd and Gillard became leader and deputy leader, and there wasn't a thing that Howard could do to shift that.
Down there,
and even changing Howard wouldn't have made any difference.
He knows Adelaide a lot better than me.
And I think that's
the polling is indicating almost a
wipeout.
And certainly a wipeout in Adelaide, where most of the seats are.
Yes.
So that's one. And
In
then
Sydney.
we've got Victoria later in the year, Jack, November from memory. And that looks like it will flip, but early days. There's certain elements of polling there that would be ringing alarm bells in the Labor government. And I don't know that they have the talent to do what normally a party would do, and that is just change leaders. I don't know that they have, they could put someone up and say, hey, look at this, it's all going to be new and wonderful now. I just don't think they are capable of renewal. Yeah.
Yes. And I've heard Alexander Downer say that there were meetings during that APEC conference. There were meetings of the federal.
I remember those days really well. There was the APEC conference, Jack. There was terrorist threats around the place relating to some ne'er-do-wells who might have obtained some rocket launchers, and that was the reason for this massive security. And I do remember the footage. There was obviously an event, and Howard was was
the low altitude
basically
flyer.
welcoming all the leaders. So there was George W., there was Vladimir, there was every leader from the APEC nations, and they shook his hand and they couldn't wait to get away from him because you don't want to be photographed with the man who is politically dead in the water. And Howard, you could tell on his face he knew this is the end. Even George W., who was a great mate of his, went, hey, I'm just going to go and stand over here now. And John was just standing there, left going, I'm screwed. I am totally screwed. Yeah, well, there were. Yeah, that's pretty much how it went, and I think there was a natural aversion to Peter Costello too, who'd irritated his cabinet colleague quite a bit, I would imagine, over the journey. What else do we have there? I mean, well, we'll get to sport and predictions and all that sort of stuff. We may as well start now, Jack. It's an hour 20 in. And as we look at things, the English have lost another wicket since, and I think they'll be at lunch now, won't they? They've lost another wicket. Joe Root caught by Alex Carey with the gloves, with Cummins bowling. And so Cummins has 2, Lyon has 2. England 4 for 86, chasing Australia's 371, which is a pretty good score. I think that's around about a par score. And there were a few problems along the way. Jake Weatherall's got a problem with a pull shot. Needs to sort that out. Marnus Labuschagne played it terribly.
That's because there were a few wickets thrown away.
Cameron Green
again.
really needs to step up a little bit in this series and show more than just potential. Usman Khawaja, of course, a very late entrant into the side, got a good 80. Shame he didn't get on and make the 100. Got out to a bit of a loose shot. He'd been pinned down on 80-odd for a while, and he got out sweeping. But, of course, a wonderful 100 from Alex Carey. Josh Inglis at 7. Got himself a 30, got a start, got bowled playing
Australia's
on.
run rate's been better than
like to have seen him make a few more. Pat Cummins, Jack, got 13, and you think, gee, I wonder the last time you had a bat in your hand was. And he may not have even had a net. Mitchell Stark, again, contributing, got 54. He got cleaned up by Archer, but he was in the business of moving things along. Scotty Boland got a lovely little 14 not out.
When they asked him if he was
not a bad score, but it did need the lower middle order to assist, including Carey, Inglis, and Stark, to get them to a good score. It's a pass score. Yeah. They were some soft dismissals. But I think that's a pass score. And I really thought that today England might get out there and blaze away. Well, Australia scored it, not we should be looking at these things too much, but they scored it 4 and over, the Australians. England running around about 3.58. Pretty slow from Zach Crawley. Only got 9, but off 19 balls. Ben Ducker, 29 off 30. Ollie Pope, 3 off 10. So there's not a lot of basballing going on, and certainly Harry Brooks 18 not out. This is a road, Jack, and it's 38 degrees in Adelaide today.
It's
just not a pleasant day to be in the field.
Got it wrong.
And 4 for 86 is just nowhere near where you want to be. Okay, clearly not. I did see that. So this was a mistake. I'd have to go back and check the score, but I'm not sure how many he was on. So he's got another 30-odd. And obviously, he did nick one. He sort of accepted that he had to the keeper. But the technology said no. In fact, the technology showed a big hiccup well before the ball got to the bat. And since then, the company responsible for Snicko has come forward and said, well, whoever set it up didn't set it up around the right set of stumps, which is kind of odd, isn't it? What do they got one at leg stump and off stump because you got left-handers, right-handers? I don't understand. Anyway, they've taken full responsibility for it, which doesn't mean much. Yeah, well, the umpire did turn it down, yeah. There might have been a noise audible, and apparently, well, certainly Carey felt it, but there was no real movement off the bat. But you think when you hear a noise like that, it can't be anything else because the bat was extended
He's a good
from the
player.
body. It
He's a
wouldn't
good
be
player, but he's
bat
not
hitting
involved.
pad or,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But anyway, that's just the way the game goes. There are still those, even with technology, there are still those moments where it can go one way or the other, and you look at the cut of the green. But 4 for 87, that is not good. That shows to me, what we've always thought about the England batting. They'd made no changes to their batting. They dropped the bowler like it was his fault. Like the last 2 tests were his fault. But you've got Zach Crawley, Ben Duckett, Ollie Pope.
It can do. I still think
more and
England's
more
got
now
enough
we're
talent
seeing
to win
them
a
3
test
for
match
bugger all.
or maybe 2.
3 for 42 today.
Yeah.
And if you're 3 for 30, your middle order's been opened up while the ball's still new.
Australia's a hard
two, you're
tour,
not gonna make
and if they
much
get
of a
on top
score,
of you,
so
they can make life
they'll
very
be flat
difficult
out getting
for you.
anywhere
and,
near.
and it gets in the mind. A lot of it's from here on in the mind.
Would be
and
their last.
It may be that
hope.
they're.
They've got a bit of a tail. Will
they're
Jackson's
kind
a
of
good
beaten.
player.
Do you remember
Jamie
back
Smith
to
looks
2006-7 when Freddie Flintoff brought a
but-
team out after the 2005 win in England?
it
after
looks
they won
all
the
the
Ashes in
season.
England.
Will Jacks looks like
Adelaide was
good
really
bat. Probably should
the
be
end
batting
of
up
the
a little
road
bit
for
higher. There was
them.
talk that he would
Remember
go
they
to
scored
3
500
and
in the
take Ollie
first innings.
Pope's position, but they
They lost
decided
the
the batsmen were
unlosable
doing
test,
well
and
enough.
after
I'm not
that
sure
test,
that
they
they'll
were
be able
kind
to
of
sustain
broken.
that argument much longer. So there's that. What's your prediction for the rest of the series? Will it be a 5-zip, 4-1? Probably get a washout sooner or later, but we've got 2 to go after this one.
Yeah, what they should have walked away from.
I thought they were going to rip in and make 500.
We had that test
quickly
in our hands, and we had a really bad afternoon. That's not the end of the world. Let's go and do something better next time, right? But they didn't. But did they mean it? Is the difference?
Yeah. They lost the unlosable. I honestly think too, Jack, that the trauma of Perth, where they had a good day 1, and then just completely fell apart on day 2. I think that, I know we use the word trauma a lot these days, often not appropriately, but I think that might have been a bit traumatic for them, and they've struggled ever since.
Yeah, Hong Kong International
International
Racing Day. Well, it's always 80,000. Right?
Run to the danger. Run to the danger.
4 big Group 1,
and
a sprint race, a mile race,
and again,
a
before
cup race
this
over
test,
2,000, and a distance race, which is always won by a visitor.
We've had this established
Rising, who won
order for
the
a
Everest a
long
while
time,
back.
Colin,
I think that's up
and
to
we're
about
not the
16
sort of
on the
side
trot
that just
now,
changes things.
winning.
Okay, all right.
And he is such
you're
a star.
basically
Let me just
denying
share this with
150
you.
years of test
I saw some footage from Nakayama
history.
races in Japan.
Gideon Hay
on
had some
Sunday.
really interesting things to say about cricket in 2027.
The horses are on the track waiting
when
to be
we
loaded
go over there.
into
That is, yes, we go over there. It's the
gates
World
for
Test
the start of
Championship.
the next
And there'll
start
be
of
the
the next
day-night
Nakayama race. And you know how they normally
anniversary
walk
of
around
the original
mainly in
test, and I
circles just to
think
keep the horses
that's
nice and
in-
loose, you know,
Gee, it'd
and
have
the
to be Melbourne, wouldn't it?
jockeys are, getting their mind in order,
that's
ready
all
to
happening
run.
in 2027. I think we
Every
play
single horse
India
for
out
this
here.
race was standing stock still,
Corrected if
so
wrong
the jockeys
in
could watch
2026,
the big screen
2027.
on the infield to watch Kailing
All
Rising's
right,
race.
what else have we got here,
He
Jack?
is
Hong Kong
he is
Racing
such a
Day.
star.
Oh, anyone go
He's
to
an
that?
absolute star. He's
Right.
so yeah, you know.
In the stalls, yeah. He's a star. All right. I know you've got a dreadful joke. Up your sleeve, but we might pass on that, Jack, as we're getting a little bit late. But because we do have to wish our listeners a very Merry Christmas. I did just want to say, Ray, we haven't forgotten you. Ray did send us a couple of letters. In fact, he acknowledged that he was published in the Sydney Morning Herald, but we will put Ray's thoughts down now. He said, shooters identified tonight on the news with 300 guns obtained legally under Howard's gun laws, so don't blame Albanese. We might just leave it at that for Ray. He thinks previous administrations might have been a bit remiss. I think those gun law reforms were absolutely necessary, by the way, but what didn't happen afterwards, the things was basically tweaked back to with a fairly strong lobby and political representation in the New South Wales upper house from the Fishers and Shooters Party, has sort of led to a little bit of watering down there that might need to be looked at. But anyway, that was from Ray. And we just wanted to say to all our listeners, just to wish you a very happy Christmas, and we trust you enjoy it. It's a great time for families and so forth, but it also can be a very trying time, particularly for those of us out there who are, lonely, living alone. So be understanding.
Christmas with some friends here,
and look after one another.
Homeless
perhaps don't go as far as my mother did,
my beloved uncle's sense of humour.
A homeless guy to our Christmas lunch one day. And my father came over and he goes, "Listen, your mother, she's got this idea, and this is what we're going to do." We all moaned and bitched about it, by the way. Not so much charity going on there, but he wandered down. He wandered in and he sat around the table with the rest of us, and we never saw him again after that. Probably didn't like the food. So might be better elsewhere. So perhaps don't go as far as that, but be at least aware that this can be a very trying time for a lot of people. And for those who are lonely, get through the day as best you can. And for those
Hanukkah party on,
who have family bursting at the seams and so forth, it can be trying as well. So hang in there, drink heavily,
so all a bit busy, but good.
And dine to your heart's content. What are you up to for Christmas, Jack? Well, that was just my father just explained. Now, listen, your mother's got this idea in her head, and that was how he explained it to Mark and I, my brother and I. And we went, "What the fuck? Yeah. Who is this guy? Who is he? What's he doing in our house?" Not full of charity, not full of Christian charity myself or my brother for that matter. But look, I'm having a very quiet Christmas here. I've got the grandkids coming along on Boxing Day. And we'll do a proper dinner then, and on Christmas Eve I've got some friends coming down to the Highlands, so we're sort of a bit skinny on the family stuff this year, and I got to tell you, I don't really mind that. Good stuff, yes, indeed, and we hope everyone enjoys the Christmas period, and we will be back and recording. We'll sort it out, but we certainly won't be doing anything next week. We might have a couple of weeks off and get back to you in, let's say, the second week of January, something of that order. Busy time for Jack. He'll be heavily intoxicated for much of the next 2 weeks, so wouldn't be much point having him on anyway. So, yeah, look, again, thanks for your support throughout the year, listeners, and we look forward to bringing you the same next year. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later. Merry Christmas.